Hey, Julie, how are you today?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
It is my pleasure. All right, so back in the, late 60s, early 70s, George Carlin gave us the 7 words you can't say on television, right? And here we are, end of 2017, and supposedly, I guess based on who you believe, we've got these 7 words that you can't say if you work for the CDC, right?
Right. Well, that's what the freak out of the week was. But it is not true.
Okay, so let's go into this because, again, the Washington Post, a big story. Trump administration has prohibited the CDC from using words like vulnerable, entitlement, diversity, transgender, fetus, evidence-based, and science-based. Post says that policy analysts were provided with alternatives to use instead of science-based or evidence-based. The suggested wording was, quote, CDC bases its recommendations on science in consideration with community standards and wishes. Okay, so what is going on here, Julie?
Well, let me give you a little bit of background on the terrible freak out that happened. So the Washington Post reporter had one source, anonymous, of course, and it wasn't confirmed by anybody else. She put this out there. She wrote the story. And again, one source. Lots of people in the meeting. Only one person said that that's what she was told. And again, it wasn't corroborated. There wasn't any other sources, and there wasn't anybody on record, of course. And that if you know anything about sort of the cycle of these stories, you sort of normally you wait a little bit and say, you sort of go, if you're smart, you'll wait a minute and say, take a deep breath. And, look, I with the Obama administration too, these wild things would come out. And so, if you waited long enough, there was more to the story and it wasn't as outrageous, or sometimes it was even more outrageous. But it's always good to kind of give yourself a day, give it 5 minutes. But instead, everybody was freaking out, talking about how, the Trump administration is banning words. There were charges of censorship and, God, you name it, all the loaded words. This is like Germany. This is Nazism. All this, and all the science communicators that I follow on Twitter were losing it. And again, a couple writers were saying, let's hold off on this. Let's see what comes of this. And it turns out it didn't come from the White House. It didn't come from the Trump administration. In fact, it appears to pretty much be not true at all. The CDC, HHS, and several other agencies have denied that there's any sort of guidance. And what they did say, though, is that these word suggestions were only for budget documents. And it turns out now, Yuval Levin did a great piece on this morning, where it was actually someone within the CDC who said, we're afraid Republicans will strip funding if you use these words. So we suggest you not use these words. So it was actually sort of some, hack at the CDC who was concerned that Republicans would be concerned about these words. And that's why this guidance was, or this guy, and it wasn't a ban. It wasn't a hard and fast rule. It was suggested that you use other words because Republicans that were on the budget committee might be concerned if they see funding for transgenderism or the word fetus. It was an actual reversal of what everyone was freaking out about. Trump never banned these words. The CDC didn't ban these words. And again, the whole reason that this guidance was given was to not rile Republicans. So I find that it's all very amusing. But again, you had this, I don't know if you followed this, but a hashtag came out of it and people were their heads were on fire about how anti-science and, how backwards the administration is. It was just complete hysteria for no reason.
Well, but again, this is the, quote unquote fake news that works because it feeds on people's biases, right? And so if you don't like Donald Trump and you don't like the Trump administration, or you're a DC resident, either you work for the government or, you got a family member who works for the government, which describes the vast majority of residents in the DC area, you are predisposed to
Well-
believe a story like this. I think.
I think this is also what really gets people angry, and it certainly gets me angry, is, the initial reaction gets, 40,000 retweets, 100,000, million retweets. Then the correction gets 4. Right? Or, there's no press coverage. The Washington Post hasn't retracted the story, by the way. And in fact, it's so funny. I went on the reporter's Twitter page, and she says, if anybody else from any other agencies has been banned using certain words, call our confidential or email our confidential. Like it's this big, huge issue. Like she's going to win the Pulitzer based on these banned that she essentially made up. So I think what frustrates people is, there's these big explosions and then there's no coverage of the correction. And look, we see this on a large scale. Look at how what the IRS did to Tea Party individuals that are part of the Tea Party and also Tea Party organizations, right? They harassed them. They tried to put them out of business. They were targeting them, right? And you had denial. And then, 5 years later, it's like, well, actually, yeah, that was true. Now that it's over and we've moved on, but these people had their lives destroyed. And so I think people who really follow this stuff closely, we see these corrections or we see them admitting things years after when people like me and people like you were suggesting that this could be actually happening. And then when we are proven right after being, made fun of or sort of dismissed as making things up. So I think that's also what's very frustrating is that you have these immediate reactions and then the correction is just not covered. Or the truth.
Well, listen, that is, you're right. And it's a huge problem. And I think that not only is it a huge problem, I think that it is a known issue that is exploited by our press, Julie.
Yep.
Okay. So it's not just like, oh boy, it really sucks that this happens. No, I think a lot of reporters are well aware that this happens.
Yep.
Right. And if you want to make a splash, what's the harm?
Right.
Right. So you go back and you issue the correction an hour or 5 hours or a day later. And as you say, it doesn't get nearly the attention that the splashy headline, the clickbait story gets.
Yeah.
Right. And there's no repercussion from your management.
None.
There's nobody in the Washington Post saying, what the hell are you doing coming up with a sole sourced anonymous story?
Right.
That, instead the editors love it. Oh, this is great. We're gonna blow this out. We'll tweet it out. We'll make sure that this gets a lot of hits. So no, this is a problem, and you're exactly right. And until this gets addressed, this is one of the reasons why more and more Americans are going to distrust the media, because this is a fixable problem.
It is. And
this is something that they can address in-house, and they refuse to do it.
That's absolutely, and this is also what makes me sick about the science communication community that I follow these people. They were going bonkers, okay, when the CDC story came out. Okay, meanwhile, they have the EPA has issued a new ruling saying that glyphosate, which is a very safe pesticide, is safe. They have reaffirmed it. That is, every science communicator out there, everybody that I sort of talk to in the science world, has been defending glyphosate. For the 8 years of the Obama administration, when it was under attack by a very activist EPA, then the Trump administration, issues this new ruling. Do we hear a peep from any of the science communicators? Nothing. There have been a lot of very good science rulings coming out of the Trump administration, and there's not a peep from these science communicators. And then this single source anonymous story comes out of the Washington Post, and everybody goes bonkers because these people in the science community are largely left of center, and they have lost perspective. They just look for any reason to beat up on Trump. It's like Charles Cook's excellent piece this week on Jennifer Rubin. It's like they just go nuts and they lose all ability to sort of think critically and to take a deep breath and really look at an issue wholly. And it's just any opportunity to beat up on Trump. It's really disappointing to see it out of that community, which I respect. A lot of them I really respect. It's just really too bad to see the sort of derangement syndrome take hold.
Listen, it's happening all over the place. We had a story yesterday out of the D.C. area, Chevy Chase, Maryland, and so we'll talk about science. We'll talk about the delusion, the feel good, and buying into the stuff that makes us feel good at the expense of reality.
Yep,
right? So the Audubon Society has this this nature preserve. And there were, it's about 40 acres. It abuts the Rock Creek Park, or it's across the street from Rock Creek Park. And they recently decided they were going to get rid of the deer in the nature preserve because there were too many deer. It was destroying the forest, and so they had to do something. So they're the Audubon Society. They don't kill deer, Julie. They don't hunt deer, right? So they had about 100 volunteers show up before dawn one Sunday morning, and they all kind of walked the property, and they gently and politely pushed the deer out through a gate because the Audubon Society had spent $250,000 to build an 8-foot tall fence to surround their 40-acre property. So they gently and lovingly and politely pushed the deer out of the preserve and across the street where there's a police escort, and they funneled them into Rock Creek Park where there's hunting taking place right now, at night, right now. Through March, there are USDA sharpshooters who are killing deer. So what is the point of this, right? I mean, again, you feel good, right? I saved deer for like an hour, maybe, right? And that, by the way, is the best case scenario, that you funnel the deer out and somebody else shot the deer, because the worst case scenario is that those deer don't get shot.
That's right.
And Rock Creek Park, which has about 3 times the sustainable population of deer, either those deer starve to death, as you say, they get hit by a car, right?
Right.
This lack of critical thinking.
Oh, I know.
And this unwillingness, and it's not an inability, it's an unwillingness to think critically about these issues. Frankly, I think, and the ease with which we can retreat into our own little bubble, honestly, we have a lot of problems in our world today. This may be the biggest.
Well, and I agree with you. You know, the FDA just announced a crackdown on homeopathic medicine. This is basically sugar water that is sold. It's very dangerous. People, I mean, we're talking people who are suffering from cancer are told that homeopathic remedies are better than actual medicine, okay? The FDA is actually cracking down. Did the Obama administration crack down on homeopathic? These lies, these non-science, and evidence-based remedies? No, they didn't. But the Trump administration is cracking down on them. And I know a lot of science communicators who've made a career of beating up on homeopathy, and there's not a peep. There's not a peep. So you have an EPA and a USDA that is going towards risk-based regulatory process, which is something that is much better, a much better framework for regulations. You have the crackdown on homeopathy, which is a lie. Homeopathic remedies do not work. You have glyphosate being declared completely safe, which is every farmer out there is thanking God that the EPA has done this, and the science community is very happy. I mean, activists aren't happy. Anti-GMO activists and anti-pesticide and chemical activists, they're not happy. But most science-minded people are happy about this. And yet, this lie comes out about these 7 words, and everybody goes bonkers. And there isn't a peep of praise for the Trump administration on all of these pro-science moves. It's a total disappointment. It really is sad to see science communicators incapable of setting aside their own politics to praise very good policy coming out of Washington.
Julie Gunlock with the Independent Women's Forum. Listen, I appreciate you coming on the program. It's always good talking with you, and we appreciate the straight talk.
Hey, well, Merry Christmas. I might not see you until then, so Merry Christmas.
Yeah, maybe not, but Merry Christmas if not. And thank you very much. We look forward to doing this again a lot in 2018 as well.
Thanks a lot.